Hey Heather, happy Monday.
Hey Susie, happy Monday. How are
How
you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great.
Good. How are things in lovely Florida?
Getting
Getting
back
back
to
to normal?
normal.
Good.
Yeah, getting back
Good.
to normal. It was a little hectic after Hurricane Milton, but
I'm sure.
I'm just
Yes.
happy that we're all safe. A lot of people that were closer to the water got hit really hard. My family in Sarasota,
Mm,
they all, they were for native Floridians, they were very afraid. I will say that. And when native Floridians are afraid of the hurricane, you know that you should be afraid of the hurricane
yeah,
and went through
gosh.
this,
I'm sh-
especially on the West Coast. So
right. Yeah, that was crazy watching that build last week, and when we had this originally scheduled, you were fleeing across the state to try to get to safer areas, and wow, it's been
well,
crazy.
and then
So,
we had tornadoes on that side, which is, and I'm from
jeez.
Kentucky.
Yeah,
So, tornadoes don't really scare me that much because in Florida, they don't get like the F4s that we're
I'm
used to in
sure.
Kentucky.
Right.
But they did get some pretty powerful tornadoes on the east coast of Florida towards the Atlantic side. So that was interesting. But yeah,
Yeah,
I'm just happy to be home. I'm happy that we didn't have a lot of damage. We had no flooding,
that's
and
awesome.
all is well here. So thanks
Good.
for
I'm glad to
asking.
hear that. Good, good. So, today we're talking about the phases of narcissistic relationships. I think an important topic for people who may have found themselves in a relationship like this, and important for people who have been through it so that they can learn to recognize the signs of what these relationships look like as they're starting to put themselves back out there again, and can avoid the pitfalls of getting into another situation like that again. So I thought maybe first we could just start by talking about those phases. There's three distinct phases of a narcissistic relationship. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? What those phases are and
Sure.
what they look like?
So, there are three phases of the narcissistic relationship, and you may see this different depending on who you're talking to. I've seen it a couple of ways. I refer to the three phases of idealization, devaluation or devalue, and the rejection phase. Some may see visuals circulate around or with the word Hoover in that cycle or that phase.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I like to think, or I guess the way my mind works, I think hoovering is an abuse tactic, not necessarily a phase, so that they can continue to maneuver through these cycles or these
Mm-hmm.
phases of the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So, the idolization phase is when the narcissistic partner is kind of creating this ideal of who they want their victims to believe they are. Right? I call it creating the mask. And in that phase, you can expect grandiose gestures, right? It's also known as the love bombing phase. There's a lot of love
Mm-hmm.
bombing that happens in idolization, um, where they are gathering some information about your past and your, I guess, pain points in previous relationships. And they want to mimic the exact opposite, right? They're trying to gather information to know what kind of partner you want. And they create this mask by giving you the things that maybe you have lacked in previous relationships, and a lot of narcissistic partners will give you lavish gifts, plan
Mm-hmm.
elaborate trips. Um, they will do, I guess, extreme acts of service, right? So if they are coming around and remodeling things in your house or showing up at basically your knight in shining armor phase, like everything
Mm-hmm.
ever could have thought in a fairy tale partner, they appear to be that for you.
Mm-hmm.
Also, in that phase, in terms of what things that they say to you, they're building you up, right? They want to make you feel like the most appreciated person on the face of the planet. They will tell you things good about yourself. They will make you feel good about yourself. They will learn what your insecurities are and try to build you up based on what they learn about your insecurities, right? And then they will quickly move into the devaluation phase. Right? The idealization phase, that tactic is to kind of secure you in a relationship and secure you in that relationship as quickly as possible.
One other thing that came to my mind as you were talking about this idealization phase, which you described so well. One thing that came to my mind was future faking. Do you think that is that part of that phase too? Yeah.
Good call out. I had that in the back of my mind and I started talking and completely skipped on that. But yes, future faking is a huge one. And future faking is basically creating plans of a life in the future, right? Like they will make promises of marriage if they know that's something that you want, plans to move in together, plans on romantic trips, whatever it is to make you long for that future life with them, right? They will, they basically are thinking 10 steps ahead so that you fall in love with this ideal. And that's exactly what it is it's an ideal. It's not real.
Right. Exactly. And you mentioned hoovering being a tactic that can be used during this idealization phase, especially after the devaluation and the rejection happens, then the hoovering can occur. And that's what, in case somebody listening isn't familiar with hoovering, it's named that way because it's named after a vacuum cleaner. It's you get sucked back in with these tactics, like you're talking about, the love bomby type stuff is used to hoover you back in. So So then devaluation.
Sorry, Susie, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's all good. We'll go there next.
Quickly after the idealization phase, you'll find yourself in devaluation. And in that phase, the narcissist or the narcissistic partner is creating doubts within their victim.
Oops, we lost her.
They've set this precedent, like the precedence of who they are or who they want us to believe they are, that's when they will kind of flip the switch and start using some of those insecurities. Like if you have confided in them about, I guess, what a past partner may have said to you that made you feel really bad about yourself, right? They will double down on this knowledge that they have of you by reaffirming that insecurity. Like, well, that's why, Joe left you, or that's why now I understand why Joe said those things about you. You really are these things, right? And so we have this concept of who we think this person was, how kind and loving and compassionate they were, that we start to doubt ourselves because that's not who they are, right? Like they don't behave that way for no reason. And so they will start to build this doubt within their victims. And they will subtly start to nitpick at small things, making you feel like you're not good enough, right? Very slowly over time, to devalue your sense of being and who you are at your core. And then they will move into rejection phase. And so the rejection phase, it can be a discard, right? Like once a narcissistic person has gotten all that they can out of their victims, a lot of times they will discard them and they will move on to someone new and they will start the phases all over. Rejection doesn't always mean the relationship will end, though, because sometimes that is just part of creating that insecurity within their partner and creating this belief that they're never going to find anyone better than the narcissist, right? And that's when they go into that tactic of hoovering, right? They'll leave for a certain period of time and do all kinds of hurtful things And then once their victims have moved on or tried to rebuild their lives, they will come back and hoover and start the love bombing phase all over again, right? And that cycle will start over. The idolization will start over, and then they'll
Right.
devalue. And so it's just like an ongoing cycle of idolization, devaluation, and then rejection. And so that's,
and then yeah. And then rinse and repeat. Like you said,
yep,
it continues until that cycle can be broken.
yep.
So yeah, really interesting. And I think also interesting is just the impact that these cycles have on the individual who's entrenched in them over time. So I was going to talk about that a little bit. There's a reason why, there's many reasons why it can be so difficult to leave these relationships. I think this cycle of abuse is really at the core of that, because these cycles, they keep us entrenched in the relationship. They create what's called cognitive dissonance, where you're having, at the core of that is confusion. You're having these conflicting emotions and feelings about this person, because things aren't always bad. You have these moments where things are really great and you're being told all the things you want to hear and you're being treated really well, but then it shifts into that, the devaluation, the rejection. So it creates these really strong feelings of confusion in the person, cognitive dissonance, which keeps us stuck, because we hold out hope that, okay, we get through the bad phase, but then something good is going to happen. And maybe this time things have actually changed and they're not going to go back to being bad. So it creates that cognitive dissonance. It also creates almost like a substance use type of an addiction in our brains, because our bodies are constantly being flooded with these good chemicals that come from the good times. When we're in that idealization phase, we've got dopamine, we've got serotonin, we've got parts of our brains being activated, the pleasure centers of our brains being activated. But then as you move into those other phases, you have things like stress hormones happening. Your bodies are being driven for more primal instincts like fear, anxiety. All of those feelings are kind of driving our behavior. So it creates almost a substance abuse like addiction, where you're just waiting for that next hit of the good, of the serotonin, of the dopamine, and it keeps us in these relationships for longer than we want to be in them. So
Yeah. And if I
is there anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, I think that's I could talk forever about that. And I know
The brain science part is so interesting. Yeah.
The reason I feel it's important to call this out is because in these relationships, very often when you stay long enough, you get isolated over time, right? And so it's really important to understand that as they're activating those pleasure centers of our brains and we're in isolation, they become our only supply of those good feelings. And so it does something to our bodies, I think, right? Like as I've been reading more about like the betrayal bond and learning and kind of correlating the addiction terminology and the addiction and recovery world with narcissistic abuse and recovering from narcissistic abuse, what I have observed is the pattern is created. Our brains subconsciously, I think, we think that they're the only people who can make us feel better because we've been isolated by this abusive person, right? So over time, once we're isolated, it's like we just become so accustomed to needing them for that we don't realize that once we're not in the relationship anymore, whenever we want to leave, it's almost impossible to imagine a life where those feelings are possible without that person. So sorry.
Absolutely. No, that's such a good point. Yeah, definitely. So when you're on the other side of this, you've left the relationship. I know one of the biggest fears I had, as well as what I hear from the women I work with, is there's this fear of getting into a relationship like that again. So I thought we could spend the last bit here just talking about what are some things to think about, what are some ways that people can avoid falling prey, falling victim to this type of relationship in the future. What comes to mind for you?
So I think if you know that you've been in a relationship like this, and for those of you that are watching live, if you have any questions, I will look through them and Susie and I will try to get to them and answer them.
Yeah,
I see that we
end.
have some folks that are tuning in. And this is a really good, I feel like, segue into asking, because a lot of people have that question.
Yeah.
Avoiding relationships, I think, is very important. I say this because when you get out of a narcissistic relationship, they've basically retrained our brain in really unhealthy ways to identify love with unhealthy behaviors. And I think that's the best way I can phrase it, right? It teaches us to behave in ways that are pleasing of others. And I think the best way to position yourself moving forward is to avoid relationships and kind of take some time to heal, whether it's hiring a coach like myself or Susie, whether it's hiring a therapist or getting into some somatic practices to release some of the trauma that has happened throughout the duration of the relationship. Just really take the time to get to know yourself. And then whenever you are in another relationship with someone new, is to take it slow, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, take it slow and understand what narcissistic patterns are and what idealization and love bombing patterns look like, so that you don't fall victim again and basically, longing for a person that doesn't really exist.
Right. Yeah. I say that a lot. Time is the biggest indicator of who someone is.
Yes.
And
it's really hard because you get out of the relationships and you feel so broken that, and we don't realize that we have the tools. And I mean, I could talk forever about that too, but sometimes we don't realize that we have the tools to fix these things within ourselves first. And we lean on some more codependent behaviors and thinking that someone is going to love me and make me feel better about myself. And so we search endlessly for partners that are potentially going to set us up for another phase of love bombing, to where, if you have that experience so many times, you're going to just be convinced that everyone is a narcissist, right? Like, I just don't want to do relationships anymore because everybody does the same thing over and over and over again.
Right. Your trust level is very low.
I will say taking your time, that's one. And then observing how your new partner handles conflict, that is probably hands down the most important for me. And that's like one of the top things that I coach my clients through is, if you feel like a boundary needs to be set, or if a boundary has been violated and you need to express that concern, that is a conflict. And how do they respond to that conflict? That is a really big indicator on the type of person you're dating.
Absolutely. Yeah. I have a gal in my meetup group, my local meetup group, who was talking about, she's just starting to dip her toe in dating and is kind of viewing it as an experiment. She's going on these dates without a lot of expectations, but she's using it as a chance for her to use her voice and to express those feelings when they come up, like, hey, this kind of rubbed me the wrong way, or hey, I really didn't like how this made me feel. And she's been doing that. And she said it's been really interesting to see how some of these people she's gone out with have responded. And she has had situations where the person got defensive or they tried to gaslight her about it. And she was like, nope, this person isn't for me. So it's such a good thing to be thinking
I
about
love
if
that.
you're starting to explore dating.
Yes.
Because yeah, the way that people handle conflict or uncomfortable situations is such a good indicator of who they are. But yeah, you have to take things slow. You have to let things unfold. And I don't know, the way I view it, the way I viewed it after starting to date is if somebody's showering me with all these compliments, and maybe they even go down the path of expressing love early on in a relationship, like they don't know you. They don't know
Yep.
you at that point. So yeah, you have to give it time.
Yeah.
I also think it can be helpful too, just to, before you start exploring new relationships, write down what's important to you. What are deal makers for you in relationships, and what are deal breakers, so that you have in mind like your firm yeses and nos as you go into these relationships. And that's where setting boundaries comes into play. If things aren't going the way that you want them to go, or if some of these red flags come up, it's a hard no, and I'm moving on. Not entertaining those types of behaviors any longer. That can be helpful too. Anything else that you can think about, to avoid falling victim in the future? I think
Um,
one other thing that just popped in my mind as we were talking is just trusting your gut. I think a lot of us come out of these relationships and we just think, gosh, if I had just listened to my inner voice, trusted my gut, maybe I wouldn't have been in that for so long, or wasted time in that relationship. Just yeah, really listening to yourself and not ignoring those feelings that come up in your body, because they will. If you've been through these relationships, your body's going to tell you when something's not right. So trusting it and listening to it is important too.
that's a really
So
good one. Is
yeah,
trusting your gut. I
yeah,
will say, and what comes to my mind when you talk about through what you were saying, knowing what it means to self gaslight, right? Because I think a lot of the times when we decide to ignore our guts, what we end up doing is minimizing ourselves and self gaslighting.
mm-hmm.
Oh, don't overreact because he said there's maybe he didn't mean it that way, or she didn't mean it. For any men that may be watching, I'm
Right.
apologize if I'm leaving out the possibility of women being abusers. But maybe he or she didn't mean it that way and I'm being too sensitive about it. I'll give him another shot, right? and
Mm-hmm.
and that's kind of what self gaslighting looks like. If you have a gut feeling about something and you start catching yourself making those sort of excuses, that is what that looks like. So
Mm-hmm. Yep.
that's something that you could work on in yourself, and understanding whether or not you do that and you ignore those gut feelings. Like, why are you ignoring your gut feelings and not, see or choosing to ignore some of those red flags?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, good stuff. I think this was a good segment about phases of narcissistic relationships and kind of what that feels like, what it does in your body, and things to be thinking about moving forward. We do have a webinar coming up, so it could be a good chance to just talk about that, because we cover some of these topics in our webinar we have planned. So the webinar we have planned is called Road to Recovery. We've got that scheduled for November 9th. If you're watching this from my YouTube channel, I've got a link to register for that. It's only $14, and it's a super great value. Heather, I don't know where you have that linked on your socials, but do you have it on your Facebook?
I
I don't
do.
know.
I think I'm live on Instagram right now, and
Okay.
it's the
Oh,
link.
that's right. You're on
So I have
Instagram.
a link
Sorry.
tree. I have a link tree in my bio if anybody is interested. The thing about Road to Recovery is we share the tools. We give you the tools you need to heal, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
to help you understand where you are, why it's so hard to recover from narcissistic abuse, because there is a reason why this word is so powerful right now, and why you see so many people actively trying to heal and recover. So why it's so hard to overcome narcissistic abuse. We have, and then we give you the tools that you need to help you understand like different healing modalities, what it does to your body, and how to recover from that. So for anybody that is interested, the link to that is in my bio. It's just $14. And then we also have a free Facebook group. That link is also in my link tree as well, where we have a community of women that are just there and trying to heal together.
I've got that linked in my YouTube description as well. So good.
We do
have any questions come through?
Yeah, we do. So I have Candy. I hope I'm just going to use the first part of your name here. It's of your username. I think it's Candy. So 6 weeks have passed since the breakup with my narc. So painful. He accused me of being a narc, and I honestly had no idea of the definition. He continually punished me by blocking me, etc. Thank you for, and then it stopped. But if you're still watching, I relate to that on so many different levels. I didn't know what that word meant either. As a matter of fact, like once I started educating myself, I didn't realize I'd lived a long period of my life before I even really established abuse terms, right? Like what did abuse even mean, and the different types. So you are not alone, and we'd love to have you over in our Facebook group if you're still watching.
Absolutely. Yeah. And a common tactic for a narcissistic abuser is to project their own shortcomings, insecurities onto their victim. So it's very common for somebody who is a narcissistic abuser for them to call their victim a narcissist. So I hear that all the time. And it's a very, very common tactic. So the more you can educate yourself and have support, the clearer you'll be able to see it for what it is. So yeah, we would love to have you join us.
I will also say on that note, if you do ever have those thoughts of, am I the narcissist? The fact that you have that thought to begin with should give you some level of insight of your self-awareness, to give you enough validation to know that you're not. That's a very short way of putting it. But if you are self-aware enough to want to know if you are hurtful to other people, and willing to ask yourself the question, am I hurting other people? Am I causing this? Am I doing this? Chances are you are not the narcissistic partner.
Yes, good point. Any other questions that came through?
No, there are just people that are being supportive of that other user. Oh, do you think that two narcs can live together and feed off each other 100%?
Yes.
Yes, they can. But then you get into a power, there's a power, like a push of power, like who is going to outpower the other, whenever you have two narcissistic people living under the same roof. It is absolutely possible.
Yeah. I don't know any statistics behind it. I assume it's less common because I think people who are narcissistic or like a diagnosed narcissist want to be with a person who they can control, who they feel they can control. So I do think it's less common, but I do think it can happen. I agree with you.
Yeah. So. And I mean, you and I took that course together, the narcissistic abuse 201, I think. Did we take that together?
Yeah.
And so when you look at the different types of narcissistic people, and you kind of understand like how they get supply. You have the vulnerable narcissist, right? The vulnerable narcissist is the one who needs pity, the one who needs to be the victim all the time and have people feel sorry for them. And they get supply and reassurance from being the victim and having people fix their problems. And then you have narcissistic people who, what is the word I'm looking for? You have the overt narcissistic people. You have the classic narcissist, like all of those different types of narcissism. that you could find a perfect match of narcissism and just kind of sit back and watch those fireworks go.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Good. Anything else that you're seeing on your end? Comments or
Traditionally,
questions?
abuse relates to physical abuse. Awareness is helping people understand the depth and complexity of mental, emotional abuse. Yes, 100%.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep. That's,
Mm-hmm.
I think, one of my biggest struggles, right? Like I used to think abuse was physical, and I didn't really understand the depths of verbal abuse, psychological abuse, emotional abuse. I didn't really understand the magnitude, but those are so covert and they go
Mm-hmm.
so noticed and so unseen that they are probably one of our biggest hurdles in trying to heal today.
Right. Yeah. They are considered domestic violence. So it's a good thing to bring awareness to here during Domestic Violence Awareness Month. That, yeah,
Yep.
emotional abuse, verbal abuse, this type of narcissistic abuse is domestic violence. So,
And that came from Lyons Brown. My narc was the funny narc. Oh, the charming one. That, yeah, overt abusers are typically more aggressive, right? Like you can spot them easier because they're so aggressive. But the funny one, the charming one, yeah, because
mm-hmm.
they try to win people over with like laughs and
Right.
ease. But
Being the center of attention. Yeah. All the
if you would
things.
like Lyons Brown, I think I'm pronouncing that right. Oh, hang on one second. My computer is not plugged in like I thought it was.
Oh, is it running out of battery?
But what I was going to say is come join us on Facebook.
Yeah, for sure. We would
We
love.
would love to have you contribute if you have gone, if you are a victim or if you have, knowledge around abuse that you can help in the community. We would love to have you.
Yes.
Here
We
we go.
welcome all you all. So great. Anything else you're seeing?
Nope.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll probably leave it there. We hope everybody has a great week, and I'm assuming we're going to be back on here next week. If anyone ever has any topics or suggestions of things they would like us to talk to, we encourage you to reach out. We would love to hear your suggestions and make some content around it. So
just really quick, I did to get one more question.
Yeah.
How do I find this material on Facebook? So we have a group. It's called Rise and Thrive Women. And if you go to my link tree in my bio, there should be a link right over to it. All you have to do is request to join.
Perfect.
And that's it.
Right. All right.
Thank you all for tuning in.
Thanks for your time, everybody. And Heather, we'll see you soon.
All right. Bye.
All right. Bye, everybody. Bye.